So welcome to a new edition of You Are My Boro with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. Hope you're well. Hope you all had a good weekend. Obviously, we will get to the Preston game and thoughts on that in a sec. But we obviously had Kieran Scott on the vid last week. Hopefully, you've had a chance to watch that. If you haven't seen it yet, then definitely give it a view on either YouTube or give it a listen on one of the podcast platforms. It is a really, really interesting bit of insight from Boro's head of football. It was a good chat, Dom, wasn't it, with Kieran? He had plenty of interesting things to say.
Yeah, it was really good, wasn't it? Really insightful. And he doesn't mind discussing anything, does he? You know that he's kind of open and he's talked about the kind of importance of transparency on regular occasions, hasn't he, since he's come in. I think it's great, especially, we spoke to him about it earlier in the summer, didn't we? And asked him about coming on. But if you get him on during a transfer window, it just becomes, well, what about X and what about Y?
Yeah.
So I do think, as beneficial as useful as or beneficial as that would be for us, I think it would be extremely tiresome for him, wouldn't it? I think it's good to get him on after a window. I don't know what you think. And
yeah, I think so. And I think, as you say, the transparency, it gives you an insight into the kind of strategic thinking that Boro are doing now. And I think what it does is it reinforces more than ever that the days of kind of knee-jerk transfer decisions and suddenly chasing players in the last second of a window that have never really been on the radar before, they're gone, aren't they? Yes, as he explained, the Ben Doak thing kind of came from nowhere, but it was a deal that Boro were willing to do because they felt like it was an opportunity that might not come around again. That's very, very different from windows we've seen in the past where Boro have been scrambling around to sign a player that they really need in the last couple of days of the window because other options have fallen through or there's been disputes about which way they were. It does feel like a lot of that is in the past and there is a much clearer strategy now and a much better cohesion between recruitment, scouting, coaching staff, head coach, which is clearly crucial.
I thought the Doak stuff was interesting where he'd said that some clubs had kind of hung their hopes on him earlier in the summer. And then when you get the deadline day and you miss out on him, where do you turn? Whereas with Boro, the Doak just felt like a nice welcome bonus, really, didn't it? If Boro hadn't signed Ben Doak on deadline day, then nobody would have been saying, well, we needed a Ben Doak or we needed another right midfielder because Boro were already well stocked in that position, weren't they? It was the kind of, I think, given themselves or put themselves in a position where in the final days, I know the Edmondson one felt necessary, but they'd put themselves in a position where they were able just to monitor really. And if any welcome added bonuses did come up, then they were in a position to act. And the other thing I think you touched on it in one of your questions where Conway, Doak, Hamilton, Morris, all very much in demand. Boro have got themselves a strong sales pitch now, haven't they?
Yeah. So that's off the pitch. Things looking pretty good. On the pitch, kind of hard to know where to pitch it. I mean, it's by no means been a bad start, but I think everyone would agree that Boro haven't got the points on the board that they maybe deserve, hope for. What's your reading of it? Because performances haven't been far off, but results-wise, it's ticking along, but probably no more than that.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect summary. And Carrick will tell you, won't he, that at this stage he's judging things on performances rather than points. It's so funny this stage of the season, isn't it? Because I came away from that game on Saturday thinking, well, 7 points out of 12. We talked about this, didn't we? Felt about par, really. Had Boro won, I think you'd have looked and thought, 10 points out of 15. That's probably above a solid start.
Yeah.
8 points out of 15 suddenly feels slightly below par. I mean, that's kind of the balance, isn't it, at this stage of the season? I think Boro's start has been kind, fixtures-wise. I don't think we've seen any of the kind of real tough tests yet. But we were talking about it this morning, weren't we? And I wrote about it over the weekend. I do think the games to come, Sunderland, West Brom, Watford, will play into Boro's favour. I think that'll play into Boro's hands. What's the hardest game on paper Boro have had so far in League or Cup? Probably Leeds away. And that was when Boro looked the best because they come up against a team who were willing to go toe-to-toe and weren't interested in just setting up to stifle. On the flip side of that, Boro have kind of put themselves in positions where they're allowing teams to set up to stifle by conceding an equaliser against Preston, so Preston had something to defend in the second half. But I do think the coming games will play more into Boro's hands than the challenges have faced. That said, if they're going to be successful this season, they need to find a way to win those games, don't they? Preston, Portsmouth, Derby.
Yeah, and it's a strange one because it's not like they're not scoring. They are scoring goals, they're creating chances. Yes, they're missing an odd chance, but it's not like the goals have completely dried up. And as you said, there are goals you can point to that you would label as soft that they've conceded. But it's not like they're looking wide open and teams are slicing them apart. And yes, the Stoke game, but I think we can have that as a write-off given the team and the competition and everything. Certainly in the league, they don't look wide open. It's just in these kind of narrow games, they're coming up with ways not to win them at the minute, which is not a good habit to be in.
No, and it's moments, isn't it? And I think Carrick said it himself after the game on Saturday. We need to start killing teams off. Preston in the first half, Boro were by far the dominant team, but Preston had their moments. There was Greenwood flash one across the face, a cross round the right that might have been Frockyar it was Potts who just missed the header, and then obviously the goal. But Boro had more than enough chances in the immediate aftermath of Conway's goal and before it, to be fair, to be out of sight. And then you're not giving teams the chance, are you, to stick 10 men behind the ball. But I think Carrick could say, well, look, if we weren't creating the chances, if we weren't playing well, like this time last year, then it's time to worry. But Carrick's absolutely clear that it's going to come together. I do think that Boro are due to wallop someone. It feels like
maybe the Stadium of Light this weekend, which we'll get to in a minute. I mean, what about the balance of the team? Is that right? Do you think? Obviously, Conway is there, kind of playing as the 10. That's led to Azaz kind of shuffling aside. Obviously, that changes in games on occasion. But how do you feel that Conway has settled in? And is the balance of that right with him playing where he is at the minute, do you think?
Well, we said, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, in a month, what's Boro's first choice forward for? Now, I don't think there's any doubt now in Carrick's mind that it's Conway at number 10. I think he's already nailed down that place. I've just been writing about it for online and in the paper on Tuesday. We asked Carrick about Conway as a number 10. Did you sign him? Did you have in your mind when you signed him that he was going to play this role, or was it something a bit like Tuba that you saw it on the training pitch and he said, no, we knew he could play this. I spoke to him about it in the negotiations before he joined, and I do think he looks at home there. He was Boro's best player on Saturday, the big plus point. I just love the urgency there. Like, he darts about. When he wins a corner, he scampers over to take it quickly, took his goal really well, never looked like missing. So I think, I don't know what you think, I think Conway 10, Latte Lath 9 is pretty nailed on. What'll be interesting, I think, in the weeks ahead is what happens either side.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that because, I think if you're right, if Conway has very quickly probably made that place his own, I think there are question marks over whether Isaiah Jones is the nailed-on starter on the right. And we've seen McGree on the left. We've seen Bergzorg on the left. We've seen Azaz on the left. That feels very much like a position that is still up for grabs. And probably, again, a bit like Boro as a whole, I don't think Jones has been by any stretch poor at the start of the season, but I don't think he's been at his best either.
No, I agree with that. I think the hope would be with Jones, wouldn't it, that Dork's arrival and Hamilton, although I can kind of think there's a bit more patience with Hamilton, really, will help Jones find another gear. On the left, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you would think a fully fit Riley McGree starts. I think that's the case. But then Azaz is a starter, isn't he? Carrick really likes Finn Azaz, and generally he's been in the side. What we haven't seen is when everyone's fit in there, who plays. So if you play McGree on the left, well, Azaz can only play at 10, but that means leaving Conway out. That's interesting. Yeah. I thought Dork looked bright from the bench on the right. That's, I think, the threat for
Jordan.
Kieran told us last week, didn't he, how excited they are about Dork. Everything you read about him is that he's a player in a hurry, even though he's 18. And like you said there, I don't think Jones has performed badly in the early weeks of the season, but has he done enough? Has he done enough to keep his place when Doak's fully up to speed?
Yeah, and obviously, at some stage, probably not massively imminently, but you would imagine before the next international break, certainly Marcus Ford is potentially going to thrust himself back into that now that he's in training.
Yeah, that's it. And we're going back a bit now, but previously, when Force has been fit, he was the start. We talked about it last year, didn't we? What we never really saw was Jones and Force fully fit. Who does Carrick prefer? Now, I know there's still talk of kind of Force potentially being an option up front as well. I just think if Carrick was going to play Force as a centre forward, he'd have done it last year when he literally didn't have any centre forward.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And he still stuck with him on the right, didn't he? So, yeah, I mean, we how many times will we write that Michael Carrick has a selection headache? Carrick last week was adamant, this is what he wants, this is what he needs. And when games come thick and fast, that will be the case. But when you look at the fixtures in the next few weeks, there aren't many midweekers. There's lots of blocks of games. So I think that's why it'll be interesting to see kind of how the first team, the first 11 shapes up.
Yeah. We'll have a look at the fixtures in a second. As I say, we will have an early look at the Sunderland game. But obviously with Kieran Scott being on last week, we didn't really discuss Michael Carrick's kind of presser stuff. So in terms of what he said before and after the game, just run us through where we're at with injuries, with people like Vandenberg, Fry, Lenihan, Howson.
Well, Fry, Lenihan, still too early to know when they're going to be back. Force is obviously back in training, although Carrick's stressed. There's no rush with him. And there isn't a rush because A, because of his injury, and B, because of the players you've got there playing already. Vandenberg and Howson are the ones, aren't they? Because before the international break, Carrick had suggested that they were close. Howson, he said, was kind of knocking his door down to play. Yeah. And they didn't play. And then they weren't involved on Saturday. Carrick said after the game on Saturday, it was too early to know for Sunderland, but they're pushing. You just wonder, don't you, whether both could have been involved on Saturday. But Carrick thought, well, we've got Edmondson in now at centre-half, who I thought was composed, confident in there. Yeah. Morris, Barlaser, Hackney. Why rush? Why take any slight risk when that Sunderland game is just around the corner? If Vandenberg's fit, you would think he goes in. Howson, maybe not, because you would expect Morris to be back in alongside Hackney, wouldn't you? Morris was obviously rested because he'd done his travelling during the national break. But yeah, they're the two, I think. They're the two, Vandenberg and Howson. And we are going to do another vid later in the week, aren't we, after press conferences, when we might have a better idea on that. I thought we'd be going into that derby on Saturday on the back of 2 wins, because I thought Boro beat Preston and Sunderland to beat Plymouth. And we got 1 point between them. Such is the championship.
Well, let's have an early, like you say, we will have a proper preview vid later in the week, but obviously all roads do lead just up the A19 to the Stadium of Light. Like you say, Sunderland obviously were top of the league, 4 wins from 4, lost to Plymouth at the weekend, major injury doubt over their centre-half, Dan Ballard, who left Plymouth's stadium with his foot in a boot. And on crutches, so you'd think he is a major doubt, and he's a big player at the back for Sunderland. But even though they've lost that game, they were only knocked off top spot when West Brom won on Sunday. So it feels like listen, it's only September, we know that, but it feels like a biggish game, doesn't it?
Yeah, that Ballard one's interesting, isn't it? Because they lost Agiolite as well a couple of weeks ago. So if Ballard's ruled out, then you've got Luke O'Neill and possibly Chris Mepham in for his debut.
Would you potentially think the lack of pace there could?
Yeah, that's what springs to mind, isn't it? Yeah, I think it'll be a great game because I just think they'll both play. I think it has all the makings of being a really, really good game, and I think both will fancy it. But yeah, I do think that Ballard one will be interesting. Whereas you think with Vandenberg, well, if they get Vandenberg back, that's a major boost. But Edmondson, I thought, was really solid. Edmondson and Clark at centre half. I think Carrick could be comfortable going in with that. Whereas having to bring Mepham in, as much kind of pedigree as Mepham's got, having to bring him in for his debut in his first bit of football this season in a game like that. It feels different, doesn't it, on the Sunderland side?
Little bit of championship news from this morning before we wrap up. Steven Schumacher gone at Stoke. Come to the Riverside, win 5-0, get sacked a week and a half later, or whatever it is. A bit of a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah, they're at Boro, aren't they, a week on Saturday? Yeah. It's one of them, isn't it, where I think it's kind of like the Tony Pulis test, really, isn't it? In that when Pulis left Boro, from the outside looking in, he got the playoffs one year and just missed out the next year. So from the outside looking in, you'd think, well, he's done a good job there. And he did, but most fans will feel it was time for him to go, didn't they, at the time? I think it's one of them, isn't it, where you can often judge from the outside and maybe not know the feeling from the inside. But Pete Smith, who covers Stoke for the Stoke Sentinel, when he tweeted this morning, I was just looking at the replies, and it was just an absolute abundance of WTF from the fans who were clearly like completely taken aback by it. It seems strange, didn't it? Because they had a rough spell last season, and at one point I thought they looked like they were going down, but I think they then won the last 3 games, started pretty solidly. I mean, 6 points out of 15, not spectacular, but solid into 3rd round of the cup. I mean, he's one of a long line, isn't he, of managers who hasn't worked out for there. And I do wonder, they've made a big thing, haven't they, of like the youngest team. I think it was the youngest team that played at Boro, then a youngest league game. They've brought John Walters in as sporting director. I just wonder whether they're going to follow the model of Boro, Sunderland, and look for a head coach rather than a manager now. I think that'll be an interesting.
Well, I think the early links are with someone who's on the coaching staff at Norwich.
Right, I've seen that.
Which, if that's right, would definitely be along those lines, wouldn't it? You know what I mean? Pretty much different to what they've done in the past. Which I guess we'll see. Any other kind of championship takeaways in the weekend? Leeds still not really clicking into gear. They lost at home to Burnley, obviously, which was a minor surprise, I think.
Plymouth, big win for Plymouth, wasn't it, against Sunderland?
Wayne Rooney, Plymouth.
Chef Wed. We both fancied Chef Wed.
That's a prediction that's not turning out. They look as bad as they did before Roll came in this time last season. Yeah,
I'm surprised by that one. I did fancy them to kick on this season. But I think, we said it previously, didn't we? When you looked at kind of the top 7, 8, it already looks to be taking shape. I tell you one, I watched Hull Chef U on Friday night. I don't know whether you saw any of that. Hull's defending, or lack of it. You wonder how long he's got there.
You do, because obviously that's an owner whose finger never seems to be far away from the trigger, should we say. He doesn't seem to need a massive invitation to sack a manager, does he?
And that's another one, isn't it? I mean, that Rossini one felt odd in the summer, didn't it? From the outside looking in to start with. When you were looking at championship managers going into a new season, he looked as solid and sound as a head coach to have in place as anyone, really, didn't he?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we will see. And as I say, we will be back at the back end of this week. Michael Carrick will obviously do his press stuff on Thursday, as does Regis Labris up at Sunderland. So we'll get a bit more idea then about how things are shaping up. Is it a derby? Dare I call it a derby? Do we want to even delve into that? It's we'll have fans shouting either way. Probably. I think the general consensus is probably not, but as long as Boro win, then we'll tolerate it being a derby.
It'd be interesting to see what Regis has to say about is it or isn't it a derby.
Yeah.
He will not get involved in that.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, we can have that out later in the week. Let us know what you think. I'm sure you'll have strong opinions either way. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and then it'll make sure that all these vids drop straight in for you. As I say, give us a like, drop us a comment, let us know what you want us to discuss, or any thoughts leading up to the Sunderland game. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, then rate and review, and again, subscribe, and you won't miss out on any of these. We'll be back later in the week when we'll be focusing in on the Sunderland game and all things Stadium of Light. But for now, thanks for watching. Have a good week, and we'll see you later for some more You Are My Boro.